Hi there. If you are currently working on a thesis or a major research paper, then the formatting of that thesis is probably the last thing that's on your mind. You're probably more worried about actually finishing the words in time. But I'm here to tell you that in just a few minutes, you can make your paper look outstanding, and that will make it read outstanding. So let's take a look at my research paper here, and I've actually formatted it according to the guidelines of my university faculty. They put out a guideline that said all the specific details, 1-inch margins, header, double spacing, everything. And this looks okay, but let's actually look at a research paper that was published within the past 10 years. And this is what that published paper looks like. A lot different, right? One thing that stands out right away is the margins are a lot bigger. And there's good reasons for this. They have made the block of text that you're scanning through back and forth, they've made it narrower. It's easier on the eyes and easier to read. And when it's easier to read, people want to read it. So I'm going to show you in this video how to make your research paper look more like this, look more professional and more readable. Let's start with what we have here. You've probably been told that double spacing is the way to go for most of your life. Double spacing is a convention left over from the typewriter era, and actually it doesn't need to be that spread out. As a general rule of thumb, for modern typography, you take the font size, which in our case our font size is 11 right now, and you take about 140% of that, and that should be your line spacing. So let's take a calculator. So our font size is 11. We want 140% of that, so we'll times it by 1.4. And that tells us that our line spacing should be 15.4 point. So I'm going to highlight this paragraph. Sorry, not the paragraph. I'm going to highlight the whole paper actually. And we're going to right click, go to paragraph, and this will give us all the options. Line spacing is set to double. We want it set to exactly. This is an option they don't give you because they don't want you messing around with this. But we wanted it to be 15.4%. That should be our magic ratio. And there we go. It's not as spread out, but still there's enough space between for you to read it clearly. Plus you can fit more on each page so you don't have to be flipping pages so much. Another thing is the margins. You can see in this published paper the margins are a lot bigger. In Microsoft Word and most word processors, you are left with the default of 1-inch margins. Here we have 1-inch margins here. What we want is actually wide margins. 2 inches on each side and 1 inch on top and bottom. There, we're looking better already. Now it flows through, your eyes will just flow through it without having to stop. And I know it seems like some of these are trivial details. They're things that your supervisor, your reader, wouldn't consciously think about. They wouldn't consciously say, oh, this guy's got kind of small margins. But believe me, the mind knows, and the mind knows when it's reading something that is laborious to read or pleasant to read for the eyes. So the next thing we're going to look at is the indentations. There's a good purpose for having indentations so you know when the start of a paragraph has come. However, this default indentation is really big, especially since we made the margins larger. This default indentation is much bigger than it needs to be. So we're going to go to this paragraph, highlight it, right click again and go to paragraph. And you see it's made our first line indentation 0.5 inches. We can crank that down to 0.3. See, it's just fine, and it's a little bit more understated. And the mind will notice this, although consciously you will not notice it. I'm going to do the same thing for this paragraph here. Right click and go to paragraph and change the first line indentation to 0.3. And you can fiddle around with these numbers, but this is in general what I found works. Here I have a block quote, and the block quote is something that is a part of the standard formatting guidelines that I was told about. However, you can make block quotes look a little better. Have them stand out from the rest of the text. I'm going to actually crank the font size down to 10. So now you can already tell visually that it's going to be a block quote. And since our first line indentation is only 0.3 inches, we can crank down the indentation on the block quote too. I'm going to go to paragraph, and the indentation, left indentation was 1 inch. I'm going to crank it down to 0.5. and it just looks better. It doesn't look as awkward or sticking out. And same with this last paragraph. I'm gonna right click, and notice I don't need to actually highlight the whole paragraph. I'm in the paragraph and it knows I'm talking about the whole paragraph. So I'm gonna turn down the first line spacing again to 0.3 inches and hit OK. A couple more things we can do to make this more readable. We have left centered font right now. We can highlight everything, make it justified. This way, the right side is just as clean and sharp as the left, and it's easy for the eyes to scan through. But notice something happened when we did the justification. This space before UNICEF is huge. It's huge compared to this space after children. And this happens with justification because the words are being spread out to take up the space of the entire line. We can fix this by enabling hyphenation. And I believe hyphenation is disabled by default, but hyphenation will eliminate those awkward spaces. So I've gone to hyphenation under page layout, and instead of none, I'll turn it to automatic. So the computer has automatically put some hyphens that will make the spacing a little bit less awkward. And believe me, I don't notice these things consciously, and I'm sure nobody does, the big spaces, but the mind notices. And that's the whole point of having good typography, is to have something appear clean such that the mind doesn't consciously know, but you leave a good impression subconsciously. Now the last thing I want to talk about is font choice. If you want to make your personality heard in your written work, don't do it by font. Especially don't use fonts like Comic Sans MS. I'm just going to show you what Comic Sans look like. Don't use this if your audience is above the age of 6, please. So I'm going to undo that. But also, we can take a look at the default fonts. Times New Roman has been default font for many years, and recently Microsoft Word has been using Calibri as default fonts. And these are okay, but they're not an ideal choice. The reason being is that they're overused. They make your work look default. They make your work look generic. If you look in any published articles, or if you look at newspapers, books, and magazines, modern works, they do not use default fonts. For my work, I've been using a font that is pretty similar to Times New Roman, but not exactly the same. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to change it to my font of choice, which is called Free Serif. And Free Serif looks a lot like Times New Roman, not exactly the same, although you won't consciously notice that I'm not using Times New Roman. The mind notices. And so the whole point is to kind of have that uniqueness, not completely wacky uniqueness, but you don't want to look default. You don't want to look Times New Roman. I'm going to put a link in the the description on how to get Free Serif, which is a free font for anybody to use. There are also paid versions. Usually professionals like to use those, but Free Serif I find is a nice free alternative for the thesis writer. I'm going to actually go to my header and do the same thing. I'm going to change the font to Free Serif so that we're nice and matching now. And just for completeness, I'm going to show you how to install a new font. When you download the file, it'll be a zip file, so you're just going to want to unzip it. And when you unzip it, you'll get files like this. If you're using Windows, Microsoft Word as a word processor, you're going to want these files, the .ttf files. So these are the 4 font files. This one, regular, bold, italic, and so on. And you're going to want to go to your search bar and just search fonts. And under settings, you'll find fonts. So here's all the fonts that are installed for me. All we need to do is take these fonts and drag them in there, and it'll install them as fonts. I'm not going to drag it because it's already been installed on my computer, but it's actually that easy. So once you do that, you'll see it in your font drop-down menu. So there you have it. changing the typography of your paper to make it readable, make it look better, and make it read better. Let's look back at what it looked like before. This is okay. This wouldn't get you docked any marks by your professor, but this, I think, reads a lot better. Thanks for watching, and I hope this has been helpful. Good luck on your thesis or research project or whatever is currently on your back.